Okay, great. Well, so thanks everybody. Any time we are talking about sustainable and clean transportation in Connecticut, the Sustainable CT program will come up. It's been hugely successful in encouraging, incentivizing, recognizing towns in doing all kinds of sustainable activities. Many of these are in the transportation area. So we really want to learn what other towns have done in Sustainable CT and what resources are available to us within the Sustainable CT program. Anybody who's been through the Sustainable CT or is registered and is working on it probably knows Alyssa Norwood already. Alyssa is Program Manager for Certification and Innovation at Sustainable CT. Alyssa is a policy expert and an attorney with broad background ranging from coalition building to research and data analysis to web design. She pretty much can do it all. And I know we did Sustainable CT in my town, and Alyssa was not only super competent and smart, but just a pleasure to work with. So we're thrilled to have Alyssa now speaking to us about Sustainable CT. Thanks.
Okay. Kelsey, would you like to make sure that Alyssa is unmuted? Okay.
All right. Hi, everybody. How's my voice?
It's beautiful.
Yes, great. It's a real pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. And thank you all to those of you who are still on to have the fortitude to sit. Obviously, the hope was that this was going to be an in-person convening when the event was first conceptualized. So I celebrate your adaptability and willingness to spend time with your screen in this way. It's not the same as being in person. So in that spirit, I know folks have different constraints, but I know a lot of people have their cameras off. I love to see your shining faces. I see a lot of names of people I haven't seen, as is true for all of us in a long time as we live life in this different way. So if there's anyone who has their camera off that might be willing to turn it on. So, oh, look at all of you. That's great. It's great to see you. So thank you for that. So if we were all in a room together, for those of you that I can see, the first thing I'd ask is anyone already familiar with Sustainable CT, either because you've heard of the program, you live in a registered community, or your community is certified? So I see some hands waving. You could give a thumbs up, hands in the air. That's great, Bernie, thank you. Looking through faces, wonderful. So we'll make this as interactive as we can. So for those who aren't familiar with what Sustainable CT is, we'll talk about the basic program principles, and I'll give you an overview in a moment before we dive into some of the transportation stories and successes that we'll share today. But I did want to frame my comments in a container of equity, because I think at this moment in the midst of our COVID crisis, it's really important to consider equity, as it always is in transportation, but particularly now. So for those who haven't seen it, on today's New York Times homepage, and I'm not sure where it is in the hard copy, there's an article that was posted, and it's called "Location Says It All, Staying at Home During Coronavirus is a Luxury." And it's an article that analyzes cell phone data and shows that those who live in wealthier areas have been significantly more able to reduce their movements relative to those in the poorest areas. So obviously we can have a small celebration in a transportation context during this unusual time that Mother Earth is getting a little bit of a respite. We heard from Gannon about the visibly decreased congestion, but obviously there's a dimension of privilege associated with that, and a lot of people don't have the luxury to stay home. So I just want to acknowledge and celebrate all of the people who are continuing to work and have to transport themselves places in these difficult times. The other thing I wanted to mention before I delve into my presentation is, for those who aren't familiar, Sustainable CT started hosting just last week what's become a weekly community conversations coffee hour. Our first two were Friday at 10 a.m. both this morning and the week before. And we hope to continue that series. You can learn more about it at sustainablecT.org. But one of our equity coaches who spoke this morning put forth this really beautiful notion of leading with love. So for all of you who are in communities, this challenge to all of us was in these really difficult times to lead with the same open heart and the same love as if every member of your community were a member of your family. So I just wanted to set the tone with those messages, and now I'll dive into the prepared content of my presentation. So next slide, please. Awesome. So I just wanted to begin with gratitude and some stage setting for all of the various players that make Sustainable CT possible. So I work at an institute called the Institute for Sustainable Energy. It's located at Eastern Connecticut State University, and we manage and oversee Sustainable CT with the generous support of many funders, but I want to particularly acknowledge our 3 founding funders, the Smart Seed Fund, the Common Sense Fund, and the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation. And Sustainable CT is a program that grew out of the efforts of a number of mayors and first selectmen who served on the Task Force for Sustainability, which was overseen by the Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. So lots of great partners and spaces for gratitude in this program, but I just wanted to name those folks specifically. Next slide. So what is Sustainable CT? I saw lots of hands and thumbs up and folks are familiar, so I'll keep this short, and if you have more questions, feel free to contact me outside of the space this webinar. But Sustainable CT is basically a program that's meant to accelerate local municipal sustainability actions. It's a highly flexible program. There's a list of opportunities. Towns select the actions that work best for their community and then move forward with implementation. And the ultimate goal is to create more efficient, thriving, safe, and healthy communities. Next slide. So in terms of the breadth of participation, it's difficult to read because I know the pins are small, but you can see this map on our homepage. But even at this high level, you can see the breadth of participation is quite staggering. The program launched just over 2 years ago, and in that time, 104 of the state's 169 municipalities are now participating in the program. A broad swath of geography. We have some of Connecticut's smallest towns as well as largest cities participating in the program. So something for everyone. Next slide. So I mentioned that we have a broad number of actions in our program, and one thing that is probably unique about Sustainable CT among other sustainability programs is we have a pretty broad conception of what we mean when we define sustainability. So you can see the 9 different areas where towns can pursue action in our program. And our obvious focus today is on clean and diverse transportation systems, but I just wanted to name that these are all highly interrelated areas. And without healthy, dynamic, and resilient planning that supports things like transit-oriented development, or without attention to healthy, efficient, and diverse housing that connects housing or economic opportunities to transportation nodes and hubs, you can't have clean transportation. So I just wanted to acknowledge the interrelatedness of all of these different areas before we take a dive into transportation specifically. Next slide. The word co-benefits has been used by many presenters previously. I heard Charles use it in his presentation preceding mine, but it's very much at the heart of our decision making when we incorporate actions into the Sustainable CT program. So we try to make sure that towns with limited time, bandwidth, and resources looking to implement sustainability practice can simultaneously realize many benefits. Obviously, a lot of the innovations that you heard about today earlier when Daphne was speaking of electric school buses and so on, you could think of the many different domains. Some of them are listed here that would be realized in the community. And on the Sustainable CT website, any action in our program has these benefit icons listed next to it, and you can sort by benefit icon. So if your community is particularly interested in actions, let's say that promote health and wellness, you can sort our actions by that parameter. Next slide. So if you're not yet already, how do you become a sustainable CT community? The steps are outlined here, but it's as easy as ensuring that your municipal leadership understands the program, buys in, and then passes a resolution that one, either establishes a sustainability team or repurposes an existing team, and then two, makes a commitment to pursue certification. You register, review the list of actions in our program, see what works for you, start work on an action associated with equity. We mentioned at the beginning that's a real focus and priority in our program. Implement one action per category, and then you're on your road to certification. Next slide, please. So this slide is here for your reference. I'm not going to read it, but I just want to underscore that Sustainable CT is really a program of partnership, and we want to see you succeed. And a number of resources and supports for towns are all listed here. I'll just mention two in particular that we're particularly proud of. So one is our Sustainable CT Fellowship program. So for those who aren't familiar with it, we have anywhere from 15 to 20 really talented students, either undergraduates or graduate students, that provide full-time support over the course of our summer and help towns complete their Sustainable CT application. And the other one that I wanted to name is that we have a number of really talented equity coaches. This notion of thinking through equity at its core is really simple. It's about inclusivity and attention to your entire community and all populations within it. But the implementation is really hard, and we recognize that. So equity coaches are available for you to think through that lens, and 4 free hours of consultative support are available to any town participating in Sustainable CT. Next slide. So what do you need to do to achieve certification? So right now we offer 2 levels of certification. There's the bronze level of certification as well as the silver level of certification. And for each of those achievements, you saw on a previous slide, we have 9 different categories through which you can pursue sustainability actions. All you need to do is complete at least 1 action per category, complete our equity toolkit, and then earn the requisite number of points. Next slide. So this is the part that I'm most excited about. That was a lot of information about certification, but it's really the success stories throughout the state that get me jazzed and inspired. So for the sake of time, there are only a few that I've shared. If you go onto the Sustainable CT website, you could look at any certified town's application and see the great things happening across the state. So we've heard a lot about different ways to promote clean transportation. So I'm going to focus on a few that might be new and some that might be overlapping. So the first is the town of South Windsor was really a pioneer in bringing to Connecticut a program that got its inception about 20 years ago in Hawaii. And the idea is that 4th grade is really an ideal time to introduce this idea of bicycle safety and education. The kids are old enough and have the motor skills that they can really be engaged. They're young enough and open enough that they're still receptive and excited and willing to listen. So it's now been more than 10 years that South Windsor served as a pilot site for a program where Bike Walk Connecticut and CROG worked in partnership to bring the 4th grade bicycle safety education to the district, and the program has grown significantly since then to all South Windsor elementary schools. The program's been duplicated in other districts, so we were really pleased to see this information in their application, and you could look at South Windsor's full PowerPoint. If you go to the Sustainable CT homepage, click on the map and click on South Windsor. Next slide. So another great project that earned points in our program was in the town of Portland. So when we think about clean transportation, we often think about vehicles. We're a very car-centric society. We've had some conversation about attention to biking and walking, but even then we tend to think about the streetscape, and we often don't think about our trails as a mode of transportation. But obviously there's been a lot of great work in terms of connecting trails in the state of Connecticut in the past several years, and the town of Portland earned points for their really diligent efforts to build a 2.3-mile extension of the Airline Trail, which now connects Portland to East Hampton. And it's obviously part of a much more significant trail network with 53 miles connecting towns for all different users, including equestrians and cross-country skiers. So we celebrate their efforts to promote clean transportation as well. Next slide. And then finally, we heard a lot about electrification today, and the city of New Haven, among many other communities in Connecticut, has been a real leader. And I apologize because in my eagerness to cut and paste, I forgot to update the top, but know that the city of New Haven has done really phenomenal work in this area with respect to providing free parking to those with electric vehicles in certain places to charge in an environment where otherwise there's paid parking. So kudos to the city of New Haven for finding additional means of incentivizing the transition to electric vehicles. Next slide. So I'm now going to pivot gears, and I think one of my colleagues is on the webinar right now, Abe Hilding-Solario, who's the program manager at Sustainable CT for an exciting initiative called the Sustainable CT Community Match Fund. And it's a really pioneering means of getting funds quickly into the hands of communities to do projects that are very grassroots. Anyone that's in a registered community can envision a project. It doesn't need to be somebody within municipal government. It can be a resident, it can be a nonprofit, it could be anyone that has a great idea to make your community better. And the way the Community Match Fund works is it's a crowdfunding platform. So folks post a project, and then Sustainable CT accelerates your fundraising by providing real-time matching funds. So for example, if I have a great idea, I put my project up and somebody donates $10, it'll immediately show up on the website as 20. So we have a couple of really great projects that relate to transportation that, again, are grassroots that I wanted to share on. So next slide. So one of them, this photograph is very reminiscent of something that Gannon put up earlier when she asked what looks appealing to walk on or through as a pedestrian and what doesn't. So this is an effort that's happening to create some lighting under the underpass that's on Mill River Trail. And the particular photograph is sort of a vision of what the finished project could look like. So you can see from the notes on the slide that the entry to Fairhaven from East Rock and the Mill River District, it's used by many different pedestrians, and it's part of the burgeoning Mill River Trail in addition to the District Innovation Campus development. So it's a place that's pretty heavily trafficked. And this is a project that successfully fundraised money through our crowdfunding platform to do the necessary work to improve upon that area to make it more accessible to pedestrians. Another example of a crowdfunding project is on our next slide. Perfect. So again, I want to thank Gannon for outlining a lot of the efforts of the Center for Latino Progress. So BCCO, again, many folks already know this, is a program of the Center for Latino Progress, and it provides an opportunity for youth and adults and otherwise to have access to bikes when they wouldn't normally otherwise for purposes of transporting themselves to work and other day-to-day obligations. And they crowdfunded for their do-it-yourself workshop series, which allows folks to come to BCCO and engage in bike maintenance essentially for free because the framework and support and tools are there for them to do it themselves. And this was a nearly $40,000 project that fundraised successfully as well. So lots of great work happening both within the Sustainable CT platform and then intricately bound with Sustainable CT, the Community Match Fund program. Next slide. So I'll just conclude with incredible gratitude. It's been wonderful to be a part of this conversation. I know that we're going to get to a more interactive and dynamic part of our presentation while we debrief, idea swap, and do next steps. But I'll just leave you with these inspiring stories and encourage you all, if you are part of a Sustainable CT community, to take a look at our action roadmap and think about where your growing edge is. What are the things in your town that you're really proud of? Where do you see yourself going going next? Is it tackling a parking strategy that makes it more efficient and promotes cleaner transportation and less unnecessary use of driving? Is it a complete streets project? And then thinking very individually, or thinking from a nonprofit perspective, what are some of the projects that you wish you could do in your community that you don't have funding for? And think about using our community match fund as a way to actualize your vision. So thank you all so much. It's great to see many of you, and looking forward to hearing the next steps that emerge.
Great. So can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
All right. Wonderful. Great presentation. And I'm looking in the chat to see if we have any questions coming up. And if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box and we can ask those. Not seeing anything come in right now. But I think we can, I think that was a great presentation and we thank you for coming. Round of applause for Alyssa and her presentation.
Yay.
So here
Great
we
job.
do have one question that came in here. Is there a clearinghouse for all the various presenters? I don't know, I think maybe that's just for.
Is that for, so I know, so we'll be talking about this, the organizers afterwards. My belief is that the presentations, we will, I believe, be able to post them on Live Green. And I'm assuming Bernie and Mark, that they'll be on PACE.
Yeah, we'll
Looks
put
like
them
we
on
see
PACE too.
So everything will be provided to everybody, all the presentations, as long as it's okay with the presenters, which I'm thinking it is. And I know Patrice will be working on a packet along with all of us to send out to all the participants with any resources, whether it's links to our websites or resources. So fear not, you will get resources and links to websites, and these presentations will be available to you all to look at deeper. And if that's not enough, and there's more, this is being recorded, so we will be able to relive our virtual gathering time and time again. I hope that helps. I hope that answers the question.